Hello and welcome to the Bloodstream Podcast, a show serving the greater bleeding disorders community, brought to you by Believe Limited and Bloodstream Media and made possible thanks to our presenting sponsor, Takeda. I am your patient advocate and host, Patrick James Lynch.
And I am your healthcare advocate, nonprofit nerd, and your other host, Amy Board, reminding you to please speak with a healthcare professional before making any treatment decisions.
We've never actually established what credentials are needed for the title of nonprofit nerd.
It's just a nerd who has worked in nonprofits.
Okay. On today's show, we have a fantastic interview with MacKay and Dana Kuhn about the efforts the Committee of 10,000, also known as COTT, are taking to preserve documents from the Tainted blood tragedy. Much more on that as we go. And we've got another Elite Athletes with Hemophilia segment, this time featuring Giovanny Pernudi, a community member, cyclist, and fellow California blood brother out here. We have got all that and more, Amy Board, on this episode. Welcome to Bloodstream.
Hey, listeners, thank you, as always, for joining us today. And if you like what you hear, which I hope you like what you hear, please share this episode on social media and subscribe to the Bloodstream Podcast wherever you get your podcasts.
I also want to remind you, dear listeners, that the Bloodstream Podcast is made possible by our presenting sponsor,
Takeda.
Yes, that's right. Takeda. Takeda's got this website, bleedingdisorders.com, where you can learn all about Takeda's resources for and commitment to the bleeding disorders community. Takeda believes in a world free of bleeds.
I know. It's pretty dope.
And they are dedicated more than ever in their efforts to offer a wide range of programs and support to help patients on their treatment journey, wherever on that journey they may be. You can learn more by simply visiting bleedingdisorders.com. One more time in a funny voice, that's bleedingdisorders.com. And for their founding and ongoing support of the Bloodstream Podcast, I would just like to say thanks, Takeda.
Thank you, as always, Takeda.
And thank you to segment sponsor Sanofi for supporting the Elite Athletes segment.
Yes.
All right, Bordo, we got a lot to talk about.
I know. We have good things to talk about. I want the listeners to hear recently what happened to you. Because it's very like, it's like this would only happen to a bleeder.
Annoying. Okay.
It's like a bleeder story. Bleeder story one-on-one.
It was like a week ago, I was in this room recording for another show. And even on the drive over, I was sort of like, I got a little weird. What's going on? It's funny. My left hip is a little strange today. And
never a good sign.
Kind of feels a little, okay. Well, it's got a weird sensation in my right elbow. And sort of, that's kind of strange. And as a little time went by, I was like, this feels a little burny, a little tingly. It feels a little early bleedy. Why do I have a bleed? But if it's a bleed, why is there one in my left hip and in my right elbow? Like I didn't fall down the stairs that I don't remember.
What'd you do, man?
What's this incident? So I was like, all right, let me try to do my day. And I had something that night. I canceled that. I went home early. I was like, I'm going to infuse and like 25 minutes after infusing was feeling relief. And I was like, oh, those were bleeds. So I'm going through, what happened? Why was I bleeding in my left hip,
dear listeners,
my right elbow?
This is the best part of the whole story.
And I boiled it down. I forgot about one activity, a bleed-generating activity. I took a bath.
He took a bath.
I took a bath.
Y'all.
Twice. In back-to-back days. And when you have a giant cast on your left leg, and for those of you watching the video, and get to sit in the bath with your legs hanging out.
Because as you remember, dear listeners, our Patrick had ankle surgery. He's in a cast.
So it turns out if you do this for like 40 minutes in a row, 2 nights in a row, your left hip and this area is like, ugh. And if you're leaning backwards into your right elbow for that period of time, your right elbow is like, bah. And if you're at the end of coverage from your last injection, your body's like, uh-oh. So that was my, oh, I bathed.
Yeah.
I forgot I bathed. I had to infuse before my bath.
It was the most bleeder thing I have heard this week.
So there's that. There's just when you think you're doing anything important in your life, you get a bath bleed to remind you. By
the way, everyone, that's the bullet on our script here. Just bath bleeds.
That's it. Amy's highlighting it in real time.
I'm highlighting in real time.
That's exactly where it is. There's another bullet I should hit on before we get into what the most of this is about. As listeners to this show well know, there were recently some big changes at HFA. We talked about that here on the podcast. Since our last episode, we've made contact with leadership at HFA, and I'm expecting to have a call with their CEO and board president here in the not too distant future. And I'm hopeful that that is followed shortly by an interview here in the podcast where they can tell the community directly about what's going on and what all of this means for, amongst other things, Symposium 2024. So more to come on that. But for now, for today's episode, Amy Board, we're going to hear from Gio in a little bit in the Elite Athletes segment, but set up this really powerful interview that you led with Kathy and Dana, these two community stalwarts who I've seen them making the rounds and doing things on behalf of this community since I started my work a long time ago. So set this up for us. What are they here to talk about?
Well, I will say that Kathy MacKay, dear community member, she lost her husband in the HIV crisis, is a regular listener of Bloodstream. So shout out to Kathy. I bet she's listening to this. But she did what we badger you all to do all the time, which is we always say, if there's anything that you'd like to talk about or any topic that we should be aware of, please let us know so we can get you or get a guest on the show. And she did that. She badgered us in the most wonderful, graceful way. But Kathy is working with Dana Kuhn at the Committee of 10,000, otherwise known as COTT. It's still going. It's still going strong. And they are working at the moment to preserve a legion of documents, actually, about not about that time, but during that time. These documents are incredible. They're going to tell us the whole story of kind of where they've been housed, and then the fundraising efforts that are slowly starting to happen to get these documents preserved so they can be transparent to everyone, to the public, which is wonderful, but also I think to preserve this time in our history. This year, it was so interesting to get her email because we are working on a film right now that will be premiering this year. It's called On the Shoulders of Giants, that is about preserving the legacy of our older generation and the ones that came before us. And slowly, these stories are starting to become quieter and quieter and quieter. We're starting to lose our giants. Val Bias was, a huge leader and a giant in our community. And so this is just this interview, this topic is very near and dear to my heart. And Dana Kuhn is legendary in our community. And I think there is a large population maybe of listeners that have never heard his name before. He is wonderful. He is a blood brother among us and has been a leader and an advocacy leader, truly a legend in this community. So it was just a joy to talk to the two of them, and I think you'll really enjoy this interview. Listeners, I am joined today by legends. I will have to say legends in the hemophilia community, Dana Kuhn and Kathy MacKay. Thank you so much for joining me here on Bloodstream. I feel like I won the prize, that I get to be the one talking to the both of you. Thank you for joining me on the podcast.
Yes, thank you for giving us a chance to talk about advocacy here.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Absolutely. Kathy, I'm going to start with you because selfishly, you wrote us an email. We badger our listeners to send us emails about topics that we should talk about, and you did it. As a loyal listener, you were like, this is important. So I will turn it over to you first. Tell me a little bit about your advocacy history here in the hemophilia community, how you got involved, your husband, Dave. Tell me a little bit and our listeners about you.
Sure. There's an So I will tell you up front that I was not involved in the hemophilia community while my husband was alive. We were living in New Hampshire. His name was Dave, wonderful guy, special education teacher. I met him and fell in love with him shortly after he showed up on my doorstep on Halloween dressed as Dracula. I didn't understand the humor there, but I soon learned. And long story short, we ended up getting married. But before then, he actually was diagnosed with HIV and hepatitis C. Now, we didn't know the history of what had happened, and we were not connected to any communities along the way. And therefore, I just didn't know. I didn't know about COTT's existence. I wish I did. Dave and I both could have used the support along the way, emotional support that COTT had to offer. And so he died in June of 1997. And 2 weeks after he died, I received a call from John Ryder, who was the then social worker for the Committee of 10,000. And it was during their the Ricky Ray bill days, the Ricky Ray Hemophilia Relief Fund Act, where COTT had helped draft a bill to, Dana, correct me if I'm getting the facts wrong here, but to provide a payment to hemophiliacs and their next of kin who contracted HIV from blood products. So John quickly alerted me to the history and of COTT. I asked what is COTT and who is Ricky Ray, and I became educated very quickly. And I realized that so much had come before me that I was benefiting from. For example, the class action lawsuit, which COTT was involved in, the Ricky Ray bill, which had been going on behind the scenes, Dana's work with COTT and other folks that he will speak about, I'm sure, who were involved in sort of the investigative part of the blood supply crisis. And I realized this just didn't happen out of thin air, that I, now being a part of this community, had an obligation to do at least my part, no matter how small in comparison to, what I call these giants that came before me. So that's when I, just started going to Washington several times a year until Ricky Ray was passed. The Ricky Ray bill was passed and funded. Along the way, I took pictures because I was a newspaper photographer. So I just felt instinctively at first, I began taking photographs just to document this history. And it really became my mission in life to keep this history alive and to make sure that it is preserved and that we don't forget about it, because I've noticed back then and even today, so few people know about what happened with the blood supply. And again, it's all about, it may seem cliche at this point, but it's really all about making sure such a tragedy does not occur again. So it's all about preservation and education.
Thank you, Kathy. Before we move on, Dana, I had the opportunity last year to interview several of your advocacy peers from back in the day, and there was one name that just was said all over, and it was yours. And so when I finally met you last year, I felt like I was meeting a celebrity because, I'm an idiot like that. So I'm so excited to get an opportunity to speak with you now. And I wondered if you could share with our listeners a little bit about the evolution of COTT. What was its genesis? What was it set up for? And how it has kind of evolved throughout the years?
Sure. And first, I want to say, how glad I am to have an opportunity to kind of share with Kathy. And Kathy is absolutely superb. She's a star. And the reason she's a star is because she captured what was happening on film. And it was, pictures worth 1,000 words. If we didn't have the pictures that she took to go along with the stories, it wouldn't make the impact that it makes today. And it's great to kind of have an opportunity to see all the pictures that she put together during the times that I call them the tumultuous years. Really, the tumultuous years from 1992 to probably about 1995, 96. And but her pictures, you look at them and you just, tears well up in my eyes when I look at them and think about where we were at those times and were we ever going to accomplish what we did. And it did. It happened. It all happened. But that's not the question you asked me. So the question you asked me is, how did COTT come along? Well, unfortunately, a lot of the founders and a lot of the people who are part of COTT are gone, and it really breaks my heart. fine people that really were involved in COTT. And COTT was a real energizer to what was taking place. They marched to a beat of a different drum, or a different beat of a different drum. They were great at being able to advocate. And I came along in it was probably, I'm trying to think about it, it was about 1993. Prior to that, I was very involved with NHF, and NHF was at that time teetotering about whether or not they wanted to let people associate hemophilia and AIDS. And it was very silent, and they kept silent, and they encouraged people to be silent because of the discrimination that they saw happen to not only Ryan White, but Ricky Ray and their family. And so everybody was very silent about all of this. And I remember, I think what was a catalyst of things is at that point, no one was coming out and who had hemophilia, and families weren't coming out and telling anybody that they were infected with HIV. There were some that were going through litigation, but those were really the only ones that were kind of, I guess, public. But that was even sheltered too because of the lawsuits that were taking place, and these are more private lawsuits. And I know that I came out in 1992 of September, and on National Public Radio, Alex Chadwick, who did Morning Edition, I sent him a lot of information that I had gathered from the Trail of AIDS and the AIDS and the hemophilia community, about a 250-page document, and that was a document that really was a catalyst for so many things that took place. Lawsuits, the Institute of Medicine study, and then eventually the class action suit. But where I came in contact with COTT was, I'd have to say, first of all, through Michael Rosenberg and the Peer Association, and they were really, I would call them activists, and they really, and Michael was wonderful at least starting the groundwork of finding documents that revealed what the government knew and what pharmaceutical companies knew, when and at what dates, and started that. And then he became sick. But anyway, in 1992, when I was on National Public Radio, I was introduced as Mr. X. And by the end, and then there was also Jonathan Wadley was on that broadcast, but he would not reveal his name. And the reason he didn't reveal his name is because he had a job, and he was trying to, again, afraid of the discrimination and that could happen, and how he could lose his job. Well, I was working in the hospital at that time, and I had gotten the job, came through the hell that I came through, and it was at the point of in that interview that I revealed all the documents that I had, and Alex Chadwick was kept on asking questions, and finally he was coming to the end of the interview, and he says, "Are you willing to tell us your name, Mr. X?" And I said, "Yes, it's Dana Kuhn." And I'll tell you, the phone started ringing off the hook, and Jeff called me. People were calling me, and they were just saying, "Why did you do that? Why did you associate hemophilia and AIDS? Why? No one wanted to really do that." And I thought, well, I have nothing to lose. I lost a lot. I have everything to gain now. And that's what I did. And that's what catapulted me into doing what I was supposed to do, is find out why there were unnecessary deaths in this community, including my wife's death. And when I came out of being silent and being silent no more, that's when I learned about the Committee of 10,000. And the first person that I had met were Jonathan and Corey Dubin and Tom Fahey. I was invited for some reason. They had learned about me, and I went up to Boston area. They had a retreat, and they invited me to come to it. And I brought my documents and everything. And that's where I met them and just bonded with them and realized that, we've got to do something together to bring an end to this. First of all, find a way to bring some justice to what happened, and then look for a preventative way for this never to happen again. And that's where I met Jonathan and Corey and and Tom Fahey and just wonderful people who this world misses and we miss every day. So that's how COTT that I got involved with COTT. And then they also had the Haas brothers. There was Tim and Greg, and their dad, while they were on COTT, their dad was still a board member of the National Hemophilia Foundation, and they were on the COTT board. It was really, kind of very interesting, the dynamics that were going on at that time.
Wow.
And then I also met Matt and Leo Murphy, who were all just great advocates. So that's how I came to know COTT, and then worked with COTT constantly as I guess they called me their legislative advocate or director of advocacy. And that's when I started to go to the Hill probably every other week.
Dana, that's fantastic backstory, and I was really taken by how you put it, that the kind of the word on the street was silence, and that was really filtered down from the top, out of fear. There's some understanding, I guess, about being targeted in a certain way, but I can't help think, here today, I can't help think that it's almost the same. We don't talk about it very much in the hemophilia community, and that's why we're really here today, about the work that COTT has continued to do and some of the work that you all are continuing to do. So, Kathy and Dana, tell me a little bit about what COTT has been doing the last several decades leading up to this moment, and what you all are doing in order to preserve the history and to preserve some of these documents that are so crucial to that time.
Yeah, and I didn't, I left COTT because I ended up starting Patient Services Incorporated, PSI. I had to find the time to leave, but I did not leave COTT basically until after we got the Ricky Ray funding, and that came in 1998. So we were able to secure that, but all along that, it was very interesting that COTT had two branches that it went. One was legislative with the government, and that ended up going through IOM and the Academy of Sciences, which then led to the report. And then also they were going the class action suit direction, and that happened September 30, 1993, where the class action suit was certified in Chicago. And so we had two tracks that were going, legislative and lawsuit. And Jonathan kind of led the way for going through the lawsuit. And then Corey and I kind of led the way going the direction of legislative action. And then Corey flipped back and forth between legislative and the lawsuit. And he just was right in the middle of all those things. And it was really good that, we had these opportunities to work. And I didn't get too much involved with the class action lawsuit because I was spending all my time in the legislature. That's what I knew how to do best. That was my bailiwick. I could do that well. And Jonathan was doing very well at the class action suit and working with the lawyers there. So during those years, those were the directions we were going. And also, it was interesting. I don't think people really knew this, but it was around. I'm trying to think of the date. I have my documents here, someplace here, but it was around I think it was someplace around 1996, somewhere around there. That, and I'll look it up, and we could probably get more details on it. But anyway, people were dissatisfied with NHF and saying it was more for the social workers, the doctors, the nurses, not so much for the families. And so I know Jan Hamilton and many others all got together and said, let's form a organization that will be for the community, for the families, for the patients, for the people who are directly involved with hemophilia. So they started, or we met together in DC. I remember I think it was one of the restaurants in Georgetown we met at, and everybody got together. Corey was there, and Jonathan was there, and there were other key people that were there, and COTT kind of led the thing in the whole details of putting together what became called the Hemophilia Federation of America. And so people don't know that probably myself and Corey and Jonathan were kind of some of the early helping founders of Hemophilia Federation of America. But again, we didn't make a big thing of it. I spent more of my time, again, doing advocacy. But I was bringing that perspective into as they were developing around the table, kind of like a round table dinner. What is this Hemophilia Federation of America going to do? So COTT was very instrumental in starting Hemophilia Federation of America.
It's fantastic. And Kathy, what is some of the work that you all are doing now to really preserve that legacy, to preserve the history of the blood supply and some of the HIV crisis?
As I mentioned, I have been more on the periphery of COTT. I'm actually a board member now. I should say I was just elected a board member. So
you should say. Yes.
I know, I forget these things. So I am a current board member, and but I do know that being on the periphery before that COTT has been acting as a watchdog with new treatments and just kind of monitoring safety and efficacy and raising any questions that may arise concerning either of those. But more recently, with this quest to find this permanent home, that's really currently our priority. Again, because this history has to go somewhere, again, for preservation purposes, for educational purposes. And, it's not... Fewer and fewer people are around that can speak to this. And we really want to make sure that this is safe and secure. We don't want to forget history. We don't want to forget other tragic, other medical tragedies. Throughout history, terrible things have always happened. And we always want to make sure we learn from our past mistakes. And so because this history needs a home, this is where we are putting 100% of our effort right now. And so right now, UCSF, once they agree to take these documents, we have shipped all of our documents to the library. They are there now. They're in 50 banker boxes. They do include some personal documents too. And I'll just add quickly that anybody from the community that has any documents that they believe are of historic value may add them to the collection. That they will be doing that. For example, Dana's Trail of AIDS is certainly part of that connection. But right now we need to fundraise because it's going to take that to get the job done. Otherwise, we're back to square one, finding a new home. And again, chances are wherever we go, we're going to need to fundraise. So UCSF has launched a fundraising campaign, and it's just gone live, but we're right now beginning to really spread the word. You can find the campaign on COTT's website, COTT1.org. As there's a link to the fundraising, as well as the COTT Facebook page. We'll certainly be posting it multiple times up there. So this is a huge undertaking. I mean, it takes a lot of effort. It's a team effort, and we have to spread the word. So that's where our focus is right now. And then we'll reassess after, as things get rolling and we get closer to our goal, we'll reassess COTT's future mission.
So I heard 2 calls to action. One, listeners, if you have documents in your possession that have some historical value, please contact COTT. We'll give you all of that information in our program notes, and they can kind of evaluate that and see if that can't be preserved. And also, you're starting to fundraise for this. And Kathy, tell me a little bit about what documents are included and just like the process, like why do we have to fundraise? Why is this an endeavor that requires funding?
Sure. I'll answer the second question first. It requires funding because, as I mentioned, there's 50 large boxes with documents, and some of them are redundant, but it's going to require professional archivists to actually go through the documents one by one, decide which ones to keep. They're going to need to get a little more background to these documents, because if you read these documents, you may not know exactly what it's relating to. So it's going to require communicating with folks, COTT folks, to, give them some context for these documents. And so to go through 50 boxes of paperwork just requires a lot of manpower and continued research. First, what they will do is they will index. Once they know what all of these papers are, they will index them. It will be a digital archive, and then that indexing will be on the Special Archives and Special Collections website with UCSF on their page. And then then people can link to those specific documents. Now, not 100% of those documents will be up there for people to see online, because it's just too much. So if anybody wishes to, for free, get a hard copy or, have a document emailed, they may do that as well. So it's just a huge undertaking. And then, there's overhead costs and costs to actually, we want to preserve the papers, because a lot of the papers are computer printouts, which are fading in time. So that has to be physically preserved as well.
Oh, that's fantastic. And Dana and Kathy, tell me a little bit, what are some of the documents that are included? Do we know?
Thousands and thousands and thousands, and they date back all the way to what manufacturers were saying in the very beginning of the 80s, and these are the kind of documents that Corey was collecting and that I was collecting, and Michael Rosenberg was collecting, and that's why I called it the Trail of AIDS in the hemophilia community, because when I had put all that I had together that Michael Rosenberg gave me, that's just 250 pages. It's just a small amount of the documents that are all out there. There's documents about lawsuits, and many of these boxes are what Corey collected, and that's why they found their home in the university, and they were legal. They talked about the class action suit. They talked about blood safety, because that's, again, one of the biggest things that we were doing is blood safety. My job was kind of more legislative and blood safety, and Corey, again, involved with it. And I think these documents are going to be important because you'll see exactly where our government went wrong and where the pharmaceutical companies went wrong. And as Kathy said, we got to learn how to be vigilant and be able to make sure these things don't happen again. And, I want to go back a little bit and give credit to Corey, because Corey, COTT made sure that he was on the advisory committee of blood. He was on BPAC, the Blood Products Advisory Committee, BPAC. And that was quite a feat to be able to get a consumer on that with all these doctors. And Corey did a wonderful job advocating for us on that. And we would all go to those meetings and come up with questions. And then I was the one who got on to the Advisory Committee of Blood Safety and Availability, which came out of the Institute of Medicine report. And so we had all these consumers that would always now have a seat on these government committees. And that's what we want to make sure still happens. And we have to have people who are trained and qualified to be able to do that. And I think these documents in history will help people understand that.
Dana, do you think there'll be any pushback from the powers that be?
Like what powers to be? The government?
I don't know. I mean, I would assume there would be some industries that would prefer not to have these documents public.
Well, it's too late. They already are public through the Freedom of Information Act, and they're already public, through the government, and they're there. You can go out and look for them, and you can find them. But now they're going to be, as I think that this project is going to be, is very important. It's going to be all categorized, and it will be, put into some kind of logical order. And as I said, there was so much that went on between 1992 and 1995, and during those tumultuous years. It's just like, I could show you just to hold it up. I mean, this is a timeline of what happened, when, and what was going on. And this is why when they get that together out there, I would love to be able to bring some of this timeline. And, I'm kind of like a wannabe historian, but I didn't do it purposely. It came by, just the way it happened in life, and wanted to make some sense of things.
Well, Dana, Kathy, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing this to our listeners. I can absolutely confirm that our listenership is going to support this. I will personally support it. And we'd love to have you back to get kind of some updates throughout the year. Kathy, one more thing.
And I'd like to say, in terms of industry and current concern, there's different people in place now. So I do, there's different people in place now, and my hope would be that they could look at this with historic value as well. So,
yes,
100%.
And Kathy, one more thing is, I guess if it's a fundraiser, where would people send their funds to, their donation funds to support this?
There is a link on the COTT website, COTT1.org. Okay. And on that first page, there will be a link to donate to the project, as well as on the Committee of 10,000 Facebook page. We will very shortly, by the time this airs, we will have posted the link as well. So, and it's a tax deductible donation, of course.
Fantastic. And we're going to have all that info on the program notes, y'all.
Great.
Thank you so much, Dana and Kathy. I'm sure we'll have you back. Thank you for that history, and thank you for the work that you have done and are still continuing to do.
Thank you, Kathy, and thank you, Dana. Moving into our Elite Athletes with Hemophilia segment, which is, of course, supported by Sanofi, and Sanofi seeks to expand the idea of what's possible for the hemophilia community. Take a deeper look at the science behind hemophilia and an important connection between factor activity levels and potential activities at levelsmatter.com.
Today on Redefining Impossible, the podcast, we plunge into the heart of a story where sheer will clashes with the constraints of the human body. In a narrative that echoes the grit and determination of the most gripping sagas, we meet Giovanny Pernudi, a man who's turned the tides of his fate on a bicycle. A self-described rebel hemophiliac, Giovanny's journey isn't about defying the odds for glory. It's about a relentless pursuit of passion, a life lived pedaling against the challenges of severe hemophilia. In a world where limitations are often set by circumstances, Giovanny rides a different path, one that intertwines the risks of his condition with the freedom of the open road. Stay tuned as we unravel the tale of this extraordinary cyclist, whose story redefines what it means to push the boundaries of the possible. Hemophilia severity is determined by factor activity levels, a measurement of how much factor you have in your blood at the time of diagnosis. The more factor you have in your body over time, the better your bleed protection is, which is why many people with hemophilia choose to treat prophylactically. Your doctor can perform measurements to evaluate the factor activity levels in your blood. Learn more about the importance of factor activity levels by talking to your doctor and visiting levelsmatter.com.
My name is Giovanny Pernudi, hemophiliac, hemophilia A severe.
Giovanny's story isn't about elite athleticism, but rather a steadfast commitment to maintaining fitness and a sense of normalcy, all while navigating the complexities of hemophilia.
Yeah, so growing up in the late 80s, early 90s, I kind of always looked at myself as the rebel hemophiliac because all the doctors at that point always said, no, can't play sports, can't do this and that. And I went to a small school, a small private Catholic school, and to kind of fit in, I was always willing to play sports.
His voice carries the echoes of a childhood spent defying norms, pushing against the cautious voices of medical experts.
I played flag football in grade school, basketball, cross country and track in high school, and soccer. So I was always active. For better or for worse, as they say, through all the injuries and through all the ups and downs that come along with it, the bleeds, the hospitalizations and stuff like that.
But Giovanny's journey wasn't without its tribulations. The rebellion of his youth came at a cost.
Later on in life is when I started suffering the effects of so many bleeds. I had a really bad ankle, and I got it fused.
In the wake of his ankle fusion, Giovanny faced a crossroads. The end of his athletic pursuits, or the beginning of a new chapter.
And I still wanted to be active, and so I asked one of my other hemo brothers, like, what can I do? And he put me on to cycling, and I just kind of took on it, bought a bike, and just started doing it, and just kind of got more and more into it, and just went down the rabbit hole, as they say. And I still wanted to be active, and so I asked one of my other hemo brothers, like, what can I do? And he put me on to cycling, and I just kind of took on it, bought a bike, and just started doing it, and just kind of got more and more into it, and just went down the rabbit hole, as they say.
Cycling offered Giovanny not just a physical outlet, but a path to reclaim his active lifestyle. His approach to his condition and his sport is methodical, careful, yet daring.
I have kept up to date on my prophylaxis, and I kept in tune with my body for the most part. I know what I can and can't do. I know my limitations at this point. And if I felt like I didn't want to do it, I wouldn't.
His words reflect a deep understanding of his own limits and strengths, a balance of ambition and caution.
So every year post ankle surgery, I gave myself a goal. You're going to ride X amount of miles, or you're going to ride in this race.
But it's not just about the personal challenges. For Giovanny, cycling is also about community, finding a shared passion in the face of shared adversity.
We had a great group of guys, some really good friends of mine within the hemophilia community. We rode the bike portion of the Long Beach Marathon for a couple years straight.
His journey is a blend of personal triumphs and collective experiences, a testament to the power of community.
I think it's all about setting expectations, reasonable expectations, and having a plan on how to accomplish it.
Giovanny's tale isn't just about overcoming hemophilia to cycle. It's about setting a vision, pushing beyond the can'ts and shouldn'ts, and riding into a future he crafts for himself, one pedal stroke at a time.
So I think it's just you have a plan in place, you have a conversation with your team, your support system, and then you go from there.
In Giovanny Pernudi, we find not just a cyclist, but a beacon of hope and a living example that limitations are often just starting lines or greater journeys. This has been Redefining Impossible, the podcast, where the impossible is just a word for the next challenge on the road. Thanks for joining us on this episode. Don't forget to watch the film Redefining Impossible for free at eliteathleteswithhemophilia.com. And thanks once again to Sanofi for sponsoring this segment. I'm Keith Corneluk, and I'll talk to you next month on Redefining Impossible, the podcast, only on Bloodstream.
Sanofi aims to raise the bar for the patients living with hemophilia. Reimagine what's possible by visiting rareblood.disorders.com to hear more about Sanofi's dedication to the bleeding disorders community. All right, Amy Board, great episode. Gio, Dana, Kathy, thank you all for your contributions. Thank you for your work on this one, Amy. To Keith Japneet and the entire team, as always, thank you. And none of this would be possible without our presenting sponsor, Takeda. Reminder, bleedingdisorders.com to learn more. And thanks as well to Sanofi for supporting the Elite Athletes segment. Visit Levels Matter or rareblood.disorders.com to learn more about their work. All right, Amy Board, our next episode is on February 9th. We're already moving into the month of February, checking a month off of 2024, just zooming through this year. Do you have your New Year's plans yet?
For next year?
Yeah, it's coming. We're already in February, Amy.
You just gave me anxiety, like through my sternum.
What else is new? What would I be good for? If not bestowing anxiety on those I love.
Oh my God. I do not have my New Year's plans, but I do know what's coming up on the February 9th episode of Bloodstream.
We'll take it.
Okay, great. So we have another gene therapy segment. I will say the last episode of Bloodstream was a baller. It had a lot of listens, and I think there was a lot of things, HFA, but also our new gene therapy segment. Mm-hmm. I have to say, it is presented by CSL Behring, and it's just been a joy to work on. It's very exciting, and we'll be back with another segment. We have the science behind gene therapy, and we have the people we have been talking to just in the course of the segment. You're going to get great stuff all year round. So anyway, stick around next episode for that one.
And I just want to add a little bit of color to this, and I think, Keith Japneet, we can keep all this in for the listeners sticking around to the very end. You deserve to hear this behind-the-scenes kind of conversation. Commercializing gene therapy, getting to a point where it's actually a treatment option, was a major step one. And now there are questions around, but is this actually right for me? Can I actually access this? Will my insurance company pay for this? Is my hemophilia treatment center even offering this? Can I keep up with all of the follow-up? What will the benefit be versus factor or emicizumab? Is it really worth it for me? Some of this may sound obvious, but none of this is relevant when we're in clinical trials. We are not in clinical trials anymore. So how are patients, providers, treatment centers, insurers, and all stakeholders in this gene therapy for hemophilia universe, how are they approaching this moment? That's what this segment is intended to help deconstruct and answer, and we want you to benefit from everything on it. So check out the new gene therapy segment on the Bloodstream podcast.
And with that is all. For this episode.
Be sure to subscribe to the Bloodstream podcast wherever you listen to have the next episode delivered to you the moment it goes live.
Loyal listeners, as always, hit us up at mailbag@bloodstreammedia.com.
Thanks, Kathy.
That's what Kathy did. You could be like Kathy.
WWKD.
Mailbag@bloodstreammedia.com. You can email us, and of course, you can find us on social media. We're on all of the social medias.
Every single one of them.
And all the things.
That may not be true, but I am your host, Patrick James Lynch.
And I am your other host, Amy Board.
That is true, and until next time, take self-care of yourself. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Mwah.